Hello, my name is Attila Savo, and I am an academic skills tutor in the School of Education and Professional Development at the University of Huddersfield. In this four-part video series, I'm going to talk to you about giving an academic presentation. Now, if you remember, in the first part, we talked about the structure of a presentation, and now, in the second part, we are going to talk about the skills you need to give a convincing academic presentation. In particular, we'll talk about language and speech, body language, and interaction. Now, in terms of language and speech, we can talk about the what and the how, language being the what and speech the how part. In the what part, I've included the language you'll be using in your presentation. This language will be predominantly academic, with loads of expert words, obviously. But at the same time, this is still spoken language. So my recommendation would be that the language you use will be somewhere in between your written academic language and your spoken language. But what really is the focus of this part is using transitioning and signposting language. And I will tell you more about these in a minute. In the how part, there are four things that I would like to address. The volume, the tone and intonation, the speed of your presentation, and pronunciation of key terms. Now, speaking more detail about transitioning and signposting language, there's a bit of an overlap between the two. And I mean by transitioning language is basically the phrases and language that signal that you are to start talking about a point, or you have finished talking about a point and now you are moving on to another point. And this is very important to your audience because it helps them to follow your presentation systematically. And in case they are lost, for example, it also helps them to find their way back into your presentation. So phrases like, I'd like to start by, or the first point of my presentation is, or I'll begin by. Or again, when you want to say that you finished talking about a point, you could say, now I've told you about this, and we'll move on to that. Or now we've looked at this, and we'll turn to the next point, which is blah, blah, blah. So now we have looked at transitioning language, and now we'll turn to the next point, which is signposting. And by signposting, I mean phrases and expressions that help your audience identify that some important bits are coming up in your presentation. For example, if you want to call their attention that you are giving an example, you could say, for example, or for instance. If you want to emphasize a point, you could say, it's important to point out that, or importantly, or more importantly. If you want to show contrast, for example, you could say, however, or in comparison, or in contrast. Or if you want to point out a logical sequence between different points, or if you want to give a conclusion, you could say, therefore, consequently, as a result. Please note that these are just some random examples, and if you want a more complex list of signposting and transitioning language, then I would recommend you do an online research as part of your journey in learner autonomy and critical thinking. Now, moving on to the how part of your speech, one of the most common and one of the most annoying mistakes, to be honest, is when presenters speak really softly and they are just muttering under their nose. It's very annoying, and it is not an excuse that, oh, I'm shy and I don't like speaking in front of people. No. You need to adjust your volume. So don't whisper, and you have to practice your volume. In the next video, I will give you some practical advice on how to do that. Another mistake that people make is that the presentation is too monotone. The two major reasons for that is that they either memorize their speech, or even worse, they just read it out. So this is a big no-no, okay? Please do not read and do not memorize your presentation, because if you do that, your speech will become monotone, and this will put off your audience really quickly. Another problem with memorizing is not in your tone of voice, but also if you forget what you wanted to say, this will throw you off. So it is a good idea to write out what you want to say, but please do not memorize it. Instead, highlight the key points and remember them, because if you do that, then your presentation will be more natural. It's also a good idea to use pauses after important points. If you use pauses, this will help your audience to sort of digest what you have just said. Use your intonation, raise your voice, or sometimes drop them. Okay, the next point I would like to make is about the speed of your presentation. A lot of people think that if they speak faster, then they can squeeze in more points into their presentation, into the allocated time. My advice would be exactly the opposite. Don't speak faster. Instead, reduce the content. Because if you speak really fast, again, your audience will lose the plot, if you will. My recommendation would be approximately 150 words per minute. So again, it's a good idea to write out what you want to say, because this way you can also control the timing of your presentation. Finally, you should also pay special attention to the pronunciation of key terms. Especially if you're not a native speaker of English, don't focus on the pronunciation of each and every word, but you have to get the key terms right. So use phonemic transcriptions if that helps you, or ask advice from others how to pronounce the key terms. Okay, now let me move on to the next point, that is body language in your presentation. Using an animated body language can help you at least in 3 ways. Okay, the first is that it will help you to emphasize your point. If you raise your hand, for example, or it can also help you to convey your message. And finally, if you practice your body language, it will also help you to control your nerves, so you will be able to manage your nervousness. The last point I would like to make in this video is interactions. And here, by interactions, I want to call your attention to the point that regardless who your audience is, they are very likely to copy your mood and your attitude toward the topic and your attitude in general. Therefore, I suggest that you should be always positive, smile a lot, and show your enthusiasm towards the topic of your presentation. And this way, your audience will actually take on your enthusiasm. So, to sum up, in this video we have looked at some important skills you need to be aware when giving a presentation. We looked at the language and speech elements, signposting and transitioning, volume, intonation and speed and pronunciation, and finally we looked at the importance of body language and interaction. This is the end of the second video. I hope you found it useful, and hope you will check out the third video where I'm going to talk to you about visual aids. Thanks for watching. Bye.